Hello, friends, fellow artists, and Art League family. This is William McMahon. I'm here on behalf of Art League Online. In this video, I'm going to be showing you general proportions for a human figure standing naturally, and then I'm going to do a fairly basic pose, someone with their hand on their hip, just looking down at their phone. Hope you enjoy the video. All right, so first I'm going to just show general proportions and how I would build a figure just standing in a relaxed manner. I'm going to start the head, and this is going to be general generic proportions. Everything that I do is going to be general generic. There's going to be little variations with every person, and I'm also going to be doing my figure in an androgynous manner. Start with a single line for the neck. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to show bone structure. Arc of the shoulders, one shoulder, second shoulder. You see me placing a little sphere at each shoulder. That's what I'm going to do for every single joint in this piece. And that is the single most important thing that I can state in terms of advice for figure drawing, and that is never to slide through a joint. Unless you have suffered a dramatic injury, the only place that we're going to be bending is going to be at our joints or our hinges. So it's important to be very, very aware of those joints in creating your drawing. With that being said, we will bend the spine. The spine is more malleable. Here we're going to have more organic bends. Everywhere else is going to be taking place at a joint. So I have the human head. Generically, we can think of the human body as being 7.5 heads or 8 heads high. From the shoulders to the hip mass here, also known as the great trochanter, the pelvic region. We're going to have the rib cage taking up about 2/3 of that space here. The rib cage is the largest mass in the body. This is the second largest mass in the body. From shoulder to hip is going to be about the same length as hip to knee. This is going to be the longest bone in the body, the femur. And then from the knee to the ankle is going to be almost that same length, just a little bit less. Ankles and wrists are very easy to slide through. Make sure you don't do that. For the feet, we can just sort of think of them initially as kind of like a triangle or cone, the little semicircle. For the heel, I would encourage people to get in the habit of making hands and feet too big rather than too small. A young artist pupil of mine named Juli is back from SCAD. I was reviewing some of her figure drawings. I was thrilled to see nice big feet and big hands. Feet are going to be the base of the figure, so it's important to give a nice sturdy base. Hands are going to be the most expressive sort of part of our body, and they're also our main tool. That's what we draw with, that's what we build with, that's what we eat with. Now from the shoulder to the elbow is going to align right around with the bottom of the rib cage mass. Then we're going to think elbow to wrist, which is going to be approximately at the base of the pelvis. And then we'll just block in just sort of a mitten, nice large mitten for the shape of the hand, which again, it's going to vary from person to person, but if your arms and hands are kind of hanging, they're usually going to be somewhere around the mid-thigh. So this is my structure here. Now I'm going to build simple shapes on top of this. I'm going to think about the neck not being that, but being a cylinder that fits into a flattened out diamond shape, collarbone, clavicle. I'm going to come here, I'm going to mass around the rib cage, back out for the hips. Crotch area, I'm just going to make kind of a triangle. Something for the legs to grow out of. Now the broadest part of the thighs is going to be the top part of the thigh. They are going to gradually narrow towards the knee, although not narrowing to a point. Then for the calf muscles, we are going to think of the calf muscles being broadest approximately 2/3 of the way up from the lower legs. We're going to broaden to the calf, then we're going to narrow to the ankle. It's going to be thinner than the knee, but again, we're not going to narrow to a point. So again, we lay in the bone structure, establish our joints, and then build simple shapes on top of that bone structure. The arm is going to be 2 parts with 3 shapes. Soft sphere for the shoulder, cylinder for the bicep region. Right when you hit your elbow, you're going to want to then broaden and create sort of a cone. Again, narrowing towards the wrist. Somewhat analogous to the calves, except again, the calves are going to be broadening from the knee to the point, which is like about 2/3 of the way up. Whereas the forearm is going to be broadest right at the elbow and then narrowing to the wrist. And then we would nuance this. One area that's of importance is right here, the transition from the shoulder into the chest. That's an important transitional area. And then we could nuance the figure and add suggestion for the tricep, etc., and nuance these forms and make them and show the musculature more. But that's kind of the basic way in which I'm going to build a figure. Now I'm going to do a simple pose of a figure. I'm just going to have someone with their hand on their hip looking down at their phone. So I'm going to now this time have the head initially tilting down, and then I'm going to show the vertical axis, where's the center of the face vertically. And right off the bat, I'm blocking in the back of the head. People don't usually realize, but the human head is generally as deep as it is tall. See people minimize the back of the head quite regularly. Now I'm going to show the neck at an angle. I'm going to now show the shoulders at an angle. One shoulder, second shoulder. And as the figure is turning, you can now see in this position, the head is located symmetrically with the shoulders equidistant apart. When you start tilting the figure in perspective, you'll see different relationships. Now this shoulder is going to be closer to the viewer. Do a little arc of the spine coming forward. I will have a little bit of an angle between the hips. It's not going to be quite as extreme as the shoulder angle because with the head dipping, little dip this way. Hip mass, rib cage mass, again taking up about 2/3 the torso. This leg I'm going to have bent. This leg I'm going to have more erect. And again, I'm going to think shoulder to hip, hip to knee. So I know my knee is going to be around here. And those kind of relationships change if you start putting the figure in more dramatic poses or with foreshortening where a leg is coming towards the viewer. It's less relevant. But when you see a figure from kind of more straight on, a pose like this, you can use these measurements. I always want to be mindful of where the big toe is. I see people actually put feet on backwards more regularly than you might think. Hip here, hip, knee, ankle, never sliding through a joint, checking my proportions, blocking this foot in, thinking about the big toe being in closer to the center of the body, semicircle for the heel. This foot will be coming more towards the viewer, less semicircle, big toe here. Shoulder to elbow, elbow to wrist. And you see too, I almost always, I'm going to establish the core and the legs of the body before I add the arms. My anatomy instructor, Bonnie Skolarski, she had a saying, arms are extraneous. She felt that almost always the real balance and dynamism of a pose occurred in here, and that arms could be doing any number of different things without changing the kind of core pose. So I try to establish my torso and my legs first and then go to my arms later. Usually. There's exceptions to all these rules, but generally that's how I'm going to try to operate. I recently put out a couple of videos on how to draw hands. Hands are right at the top of the most important thing anyone can practice. I'm not going to spend time on them today because this is about posing a figure. In general, though, please practice hands. Head angle down, building the cylinder around the neck, fitting that into my flattened out diamond-shaped clavicle, massing around the rib cage, pinching in and out. Now the figure's a little bit twisted, so we're going to see a little bit of the butt over here. Also called this step that I'm doing adding Superman underwear. Some of these superheroes wearing underwear on the outside of their outfit can be helpful for this. Broadest at the top of the thigh, narrowing towards the knee. Now we're going to be broadest about 2/3 of the way up the lower leg for the calf. Now this leg is going to be closer to profile. So when you see the lower leg in profile, you're seeing more of the shin. So we're going to be flatter on this side with a little more bulge on the back side for the calf here. You can see too that the feet aren't exactly on the same plane. This leg is a little bit closer to the viewer, a little bit lower. This leg, the way the figure's tilted and with the leg being bent, a little bit further away from the viewer, so therefore that's going to move up the picture plane. Sphere for the shoulder, cylinder for the bicep. Right when I hit the elbow, cone, broadest of the elbow, narrowing towards the wrist. Cylinder, cone. Little more specificity on what's going on with the hand here. Have this wrapping around. Most important thing about drawing a hand, every finger is 3 sections or segments fitting together to create one. Thumb will be only 2. Firmly establish the wrist, show the angle of the hand. So I'm just going to try to show the wrist. The palm really would be kind of coming towards me at this point. Again, even though it's a small drawing, I'm really trying to think of each finger as being 3 parts fitting together. This will be a row of my initial knuckles. So I ended up spending a little bit more time on this hand trying to figure out how it was going to look in perspective. It would be something I would then return to in my nuancing. The final part of this drawing would be to establish my light source, and then I'm going to hit edges. On my edge opposite the light source, I'm going to lean heavy. Edges are an opportunity to showcase texture and light source. So the human form is going to be pretty smooth. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to try to have more long continuous lines. along my edge opposite the light source, especially in concave areas. Or if for example, a hand is resting on a surface, anytime you have something resting on a surface, you can push your darks there. And just by being mindful of this, the drawing is going to, and again with the feet, if they're on a surface, be nice and dark there to weight the figure. Now I'm going to go through and I'm going to minimize the edges closer to the light source and apply those more. And so now I'm going to use my kneaded eraser and just do a bit of cleaning up. Drawing got a bit smudged in the process. Being mindful of my edges. And now the figure should start to have some three-dimensionality without doing any shading. I could then put some contour guidelines on the figure. We think of contour as like line following form, and this is similar to the technique that I was doing in my hand videos. And these contour lines are going to just give me a bit of guidance for when I would go through and do my value application. Eventually I'm going to want rich darks, bright whites, and a range of grays in my drawing if I'm going to try to achieve the most dimensionality. And then what I would do if I was going to spend more time on this is I would follow my contour guidelines and I would start doing my hatching, my rolling hatching, informing the viewer more about the surface quality and the form. We really think of the human figure as being shapes fitting into shapes. By practicing still life can be very helpful, understanding how light works on objects, how shadows are created on objects, and how shadows are cast from objects. This sort of technique for drawing figure I've been using for many years. I found it to be very successful with artists of all levels of experience. It can be very empowering if you get this kind of formula down to be able to pose figures in any way that you want. Thank you so much for checking out the video. I hope that it was educational and entertaining. Please consider subscribing to our channel, Art League Online. We got a lot of very exciting videos coming up. We're branching out new artists, Lindsay Tackett, Pablo Rivera, Rebecca Campbell, and we have a fantastic new person on our editing team, Julie Lane. Thanks again.